After much speculation, we finally have announcement of the Demon's Souls remake. Revealed during Sony's PlayStation 5 showcase, it confirms, at last, that development is handled by the master of the remaster, Bluepoint Games, in collaboration with SIE Japan Studios. It solves the mystery of what Bluepoint's next project is, who teased in 2018 that its follow-up to the Shadow of the Colossus remake would be its most ambitious project ever. Even in a short trailer, the results immediately impress. After all, the original Demon's Souls laid the template for the Dark Souls series in 2009, 11 years ago, but as a PlayStation 3 exclusive, it's always been locked to that console. Now we have a PlayStation 5 exclusive that aims to bring a cult classic to a new generation, built from the ground up on Bluepoint's new engine. So how do the two compare? Well, I've dug deep into the original game to match the new high-quality 4K assets released by Sony. Everything from its lighting to model quality to volumetric effects are touched upon. It points to a grand showcase of the PS5's capabilities as a 10.28 teraflop machine, and I can confirm a native 3840x2160 resolution in every shot I've tested makes use of that. That is, with one key exception I'll cover later. Sony's blog also confirms some major technical details, stating that, in addition to beautiful shadow effects and ray tracing, players can choose between two graphics modes while playing, one focused on fidelity and one focused on frame rate. This is great news. Much like Shadow of the Colossus remake on PS4 Pro, there will be some flexibility in how to play the game. The target is likely 4K for the fidelity mode based on what we're seeing here, a huge bump over the 1440p fidelity mode of Colossus on PS4 Pro, but more will be revealed by the game's launch. What was shown then? Opening with an eerie sequence of landscapes, Bluepoint matches the pre-rendered CG sequence of the original game shot for shot. We can expect this is probably a likewise CG render though interestingly the sepia tone of the PS3 classic is lost in favour of a more natural colour palette. It brings more flair, more vibrance to this show of the dragon. Later scenes do show off major bosses though, the Storm King, the Flame Lurker and the Tower Knight, right up to enemies like the Reaper and Gargoyles. These are true snippets of Bluepoint's new engine at work. Given many of these are a match in frame composition and even timing to the PS3's boss intros, it's a fascinating glimpse into how in-engine rendering compares across the generations. A major upgrade of course comes by way of resolution. Everything runs at 3840x2160 in the remake with a passive anti-aliasing, and it's a locked 30fps as far as we can see from a 30fps encoded trailer. That's a huge boost over the PS3 release 11 years ago, with its fixed 720p output and struggling 30fps frame rate. Sadly, servers closed on the original PS3 game in 2018, but even returning to its offline mode, this game is still defined by its brutal difficulty. There's much that I hope will return. The heavy focus on havoc physics for the environments and bizarre enemy ragdolls are one. There's even a form of real-time shadow casting from the player and screen motion blur which impressed at the time. Plus, draw distances on those long bridges rarely showed limits, with very little in the way of pop-in. As we wind our way up the Boletaria Palace, we get our first encounter with the Tower Knight, giving our first proper comparison between PS3 and PS5. Side by side, there's no end to the upgrades I could list. Grass is added underfoot, and much like Shadow of the Colossus, terrain benefits from more complex geometry. The Tower Knight itself is far more intricately detailed in up-close shots too. Now, it is lit from the front this time on PS5 rather than behind in the original, but there is a huge visible upgrade to material work. Armour is etched with a higher resolution insignia, coloured bronze and blue, and with dirt scuffs added to the bottom of that jumbo-sized shield. Whether we're looking at ray trace reflections across that armour set is unclear right now, but specular detail is vastly updated either way, under a new lighting model. Particle effects are also added to the shield's impact along with dust, plus we have an improved motion blur as that foot comes crashing down. What about the environments? Well, the palace behind is given a wholesale redesign. It's a more gothic layout, a creative flourish that sees spikes line its walls and spires adorned with blue flags. Next to the PS3 original, it's a huge technical leap in detail. Equally though, it's an art design choice on Bluepoint's behalf that creates a brighter, richer and more saturated courtyard. There's still a lot of charm to the PS3 version's gloomy green-tinged aesthetic, but to the end of showing off a more dramatic upgrade 2 console generations on, PS5 needs to move the goalposts in complexity. It needs a more ambitious target to hit, and in this sense Bluepoint has created exactly that. Thankfully, we've much more to go on in showing Bluepoint's new flourishes. A pack of 5 4K screens were released by Sony, basically showing the opening tutorial areas. Walking down that initial tunnel, we see a greater volume of plant life flanking our knight. Each firm bounces the moonlight with a specular pass in a way that just wasn't possible in the original. The underpass here is also filled with a heavy mist, volumetrics that play with the lighting to create streaks of shadow from above, plus floating debris. It's here we also see a form of parallax occlusion mapping or possibly tessellation. Note the walls to the far left and right have clear divots, protrusions on each brick where the PS3 could only push a flat surface. A look back to the Shadow of the Colossus remake shows Bluepoint has form in this sense. On PS4 they were able to add POM, screen space reflections, light shafts and moving foliage with improved draw. The Demon's Souls remake does much of this it seems, but goes even further to completely rebuild the scene. It's incredible stuff. There's more. The tutorial leads up to the Vanguard boss, but the route to it has a strong push towards gothic environments, and now the scene tells a different story. The structure up ahead is set ablaze, with pockets of fire, smoke and ash similar to the revised Shrine of Storms. And of course the floor is filled with extra rubble, plants, to fill the space around the player. It's curious to see the updates to the knight's armour as well. I've picked the same character setup, but the remake's design for the helmet and shin guards are tweaked to add more ridges. The interaction with oncoming light is also more natural all round, with reflections playing against the top and right sides where the sun is shining from. The PS3 original still surprisingly holds up, flat walls aside, but the turnout of this PS5 shot creates an almost painterly quality. The same can be said of the Vanguard boss too. Lit from above, the chamber and enemy texture materials are again completely reworked to support a new lighting engine. That geometric mesh on the enemy is also updated to put emphasis on its wing size, with neat decorative extras that again tells its story in a new way. For example, arms are now covered in broken metal links. That implies some kind of restraint was broken. This scene is practically unrecognisable, but still gorgeous to look at. It's curious to note that this shot of the Vanguard is unique for revealing a resolution of 2560 by 1440 in pixel testing. It's the only asset released so far under a native 4K, and so, perhaps, it's a sign of a high frame rate performance mode on PS5. Whether that ends up being 1440p or 60fps or not, this would be a fascinating trade-off for a faster refresh, but we'll have to see. Lighting is improved all round, and of course there's the crucial point of ray tracing. For this shot with the 3 gargoyles, there's a sense that the original cutscene served as more of a starting point for the remake to build on. In this cathedral, more lights are added, with a full ring of candles plus crepuscular rays streaked down towards the player. But it's in this scene we get our first hint of how ray trace visuals could feature on PS5. The understanding is, based on the wording of Sony's blog at least, that Demon's Souls ray tracing is focused primarily on shadows. It means a subtler use of the tech, and again there's no example of ray trace reflections as yet. But path trace shadows in a dimly lit area like this would create a much richer, all-encompassing effect around the player than screen space variants we've seen this generation. Next to SSAO or HBAO, this should be a marked upgrade when actually nearing walls, or exploring tight labyrinthine tunnels. Whether it goes beyond just shadows though will depend on seeing final code. Looking back to PS3, the original did well for its time with bloom, lens flares, and a form of depth of field, but PS5 fills the space with more depth by combining all of these effects together. Other boss intros, from the Flame Lurker to the Storm King, also show added atmospheric effects. We get enhanced rain, lightning, and high resolution alpha all round. On paper, something to look forward to seeing in an HDR implementation. Regular enemies are also redesigned. A look at the skeleton in the Shrine of Storms area shows a bleak castle ruins on PS3. It's oppressively grey, but the PS5 Remake trailer shows this spot in what's likely a pre-render, giving the enemy and environment a new artistic push. The ruins, for one, are cast ablaze with particle effects swirling around. Equally, the skeleton is fleshed out with a more armour-like structure to its bones. Side by side, you get a sense of the aesthetic change, but we'll have to see how the final game looks in engine. The result all round is visually a step far beyond the other Soulsborne games. And what's more, thanks to it being built under a new engine, this could be the first to run with an even 30 FPS cap with no frame pacing issues, something that has blighted From Software's work from Dark Souls to Bloodborne. On that note, a flashback to Demon's Souls frame rate on PS3 is a great reminder that there is a lot of room for improvement. From the very first areas in Boletaria, you could count on a drop to 12 frames per second every time a dragon wreaks havoc on this bridge. The combination of multiple enemies, broad draw distance, and lots of full res alpha for fire really hammered Sony's machine. And while there's really no confirmation on the remake's frame rate targets, the 30 FPS trailer encode at least shows no drops. On the topic of performance, Bluepoint already has a history of offering multiple ways to play. With Shadow of the Colossus on PS4 Pro, we had two options, a fidelity mode running at 1440p and 30 frames per second, but also a 60 FPS mode that was factored in from the project's start. It'll be fascinating to see how Demon's Souls has this set up for PS5. The expectation, right now anyway, is a 4K 30 FPS fidelity mode based on assets released so far. For the performance mode, the theory would be 1440p at 60 FPS, given the lower res results of that Vanguard shot, but again, that's all to be confirmed. 11 years on from its original launch, Demon's Souls Remake stands to be the best looking, most technically pioneering game in the Souls line. Bluepoint is on fine form as usual, and really, we can't wait. The snag is there's no release date just yet, though the trailer at least points to a result worth waiting for. As an example of a PS5 title sporting a true 4K picture, vastly improved visuals, and the prospect of ray tracing, it ticks so many boxes for seeing a new generation in. The comparisons show Boletaria being given a firm artistic push too, re-envisioning From Software's vision with a much changed aesthetic. Every area, enemy, and effect is radically overhauled, and there's no doubt much more to see when it arrives. But that's all from me today. For more PS5 coverage, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and of course don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.